Cherry, I want to thank you for taking the time to do this interview for us. Kind of do these kind of things to help my students understand not only the hair side, but the business side of this. So I want to again thank you for taking your time out. And let's get right into it. Give me your story, how you started in the industry, what brought you into this field.
What really, I think, got me interested in the beginning, I have an aunt who was a hairdresser. And I used to love to go when I was younger and hang out in her salon. And we're going back in the days, in the 60s, where the women all were smoking in the salon and drinking their coffee. And it was like their time,
Right.
and they looked forward to that. It wasn't a quick in, quick out. It was really, they would spend a few hours there every week because they were having their roller sets done and things like that. And just it seemed like such a happy environment. So I just thought, hey, this looks like a cool job. Maybe this is something I would like to do.
Oh, okay. So you went to school in...
So I went to school in South Dakota. My father was in the military, so we moved a lot. So when we would go back to visit his family on holidays and things like that, is when I would usually get the opportunity. I would always look forward to going into my aunt's salon. And she had a really big, busy salon. So then once we moved back there and I was in high school, I started working as like a brush girl, they called us. They had the big bins of sanitizer and then the brush to comb them out.
Gotcha.
It went into the sanitizer, then they would be set. And then when the set was brushed out, a second brush was used. So imagine all day
Brushes.
rotating the brushes that we would go through. So we would reach in there and sanitize and get every hair out. And so that was kind of what the assistants did
At that point in time,
back then.
that was an assistant position back
Exactly,
in the day.
exactly.
Okay.
You start out as a brush girl sweeping and cleaning brushes. Then you start assisting with other things. Maybe
Okay.
taking out the rollers and things like that.
Was color and those kind of things a big item back then?
Well, color was actually a big deal. And even the creative side of having to schedule, because these women were coming weekly for their sets, but then every 4 to 6 weeks was when they would have to schedule for, retouches.
Gotcha.
So frosting was big then, with the frost cap was still very popular at that time. And then single process, just for covering gray and enhancing. Nobody was really getting too much of the crazy colors just yet. By the time I started beauty school and Blondie was around and Cyndi Lauper, they started to kind of influence, I think, those really trend-driven bright colors or the pinks and purples and things like that.
Gotcha.
But a lot of Rue rinses back then, though, that gave the mauve and the violet
colors.
and the colors that are popular now that, mature women were wearing then
Right.
as their look.
Okay. Having seen that early, how has what you see now, how have those two merged in a sense that you can kind of go back to what you remember doing in that salon and seeing these young girls coming out now who want purples and oranges and those kind of colors, like the rinses and things like that. How has that transition, or how has that kind of worked for you in understanding the basics then and how to apply those things now?
Well, it's interesting because mainly it's really the maintenance. And because the rinses were used and kept in all week until they came back, most of the time the clients that I was seeing in my aunt's salon then let's say in the 60s and that when I was young compared to when I went to school in the early 80s, they weren't shampooing their hair at home. There wasn't home maintenance. Now there is. So kind of now we have to really educate our clients if they want those trend-driven colors, to know what the longevity is, what the home maintenance is. So to make them understand, like it's not something that's going to last forever. They are usually, especially the pastels, they're something that has to be maintained a lot. But I have on occasion prescribe the Rue rinses to some of my new young trendy girls that want that antique mauve color.
Right.
I tell them, put this in your hair after you've shampooed it before you blow dry, and then it'll help to keep that look in between.
Right.
Because it's not a stain, it's a temporary washout, where the semis are more of a stain, but they do kind of work together to help in that transition.
Okay. Now, from working at your own salon to owning your own salon, how long was that transition for you, and what kind of steps did you take to kind of walk yourself through that transition?
Well, when I first got out of beauty college, I did work with her as besides having been the assistant and brush girl prior to school, then I went in and worked with her sort of as a stylist as well. I evolved from that. And once I evolved from that, then also I left the area. So for many years, I wasn't even anywhere near South Dakota. I married someone in the military, so then I continued the tradition of moving every 3 years. So that's how that evolved. And I always took the places that I would work in the different states. I was continuously having to rebuild a clientele, so I became quite the master at marketing myself and building a clientele, because obviously I had to do it often. And we all know that time is money when you're there in the salon. If you're not with clients, you're not making any money. So I became really good at that, understanding the dynamics of building a clientele. And I also took all of the things that I loved about the salon and how it was ran and how the owners took care of their people, benefits, the different pay scales, all of those things, the opportunity to retail and make that extra money, again, on the hustle. You know, if you're hustling those products and you're prescribing the right products, the clients are buying them, that can really make a difference in your paycheck. So you learn all those tricks that as you're building. And then I opened my own salon in 97. I started with 800 square feet, maintained that for a year and a half, went into 1,600 square feet, maintained that for another year and a half, then moved into 3,000. Within a year, we outgrew the 3,000 and we ended up with 4,600 square feet. We had a full barber shop, salon, spa, and a learning room. Oh, wow. So we actually did continuing ed for our staff and surrounding salons as well.
Okay. Yeah. Now I got a couple of things I got to ask you from that question. Okay, let's go back to developing a clientele. How, understanding you were on the military bases, was that the crux of what your of building your clientele was based on that kind of you know, that group of women that were there that would receive the services?
Interestingly enough, not so much, because if you worked on base, most of the bases have like a barbershop and a hair salon. You can work there with any state license, but not all of them have that opportunity. And for me, I usually wanted to go into a more modern, upscale type of salon. For me, I always wanted to work in the type of salon that more reflected the stylist that I wanted to be. On trend, on top of what was going on now. So usually what I would do is look for that salon, you know, research for that salon, which nowadays is much easier because you can go on Yelp and these Googles and things like that, where back then you really had to kind of go out and visit them and ask the right questions and whatnot. And so for me, I think that, you know, that would have been the easy way. And I have worked in that environment on base because it's a franchise actually. So it'd be like working for Supercuts or one of those kind of like franchise companies, which was nice because you got training, the pay scale was there, you could have an hourly and a commission. So that was beneficial for when you're moving, especially if you're moving somewhere short term, because if you're there long term, then you know that you can build the clientele. Often if we got stationed somewhere, say a year and a half, let's face it, in a year and a half it would be very tough to establish yourself. So the great part about that is you always had the continuous walk-ins, you had a wage coming in and a salary plus your commission for how hard you work. So it was beneficial in that sense, but it wasn't always an option. So often you did have to take the other option of working out in the economy and building a clientele like any other hairdresser. The traditional ways, exactly.
Okay. Now let's talk about the steps with your salon. From 800 to 1,600 square feet. Was your 800 square foot salon commission, booth rental, and how did it grow?
So when I started out with my salon, I started with booth rental. Because when I first opened it, I knew that I wanted a space for me to work in. I was having trouble finding the right environment. We were in a small town in Georgia. So I was having a hard time finding the right environment fit for me. So I decided that I would open this with some people that I had met. So basically, I signed over the lease. I got everything, all the equipment and all of that. They came in and subleased from me.
Gotcha.
And there were 4 of us starting out.
Gotcha.
Then it started to grow. Well, it got where we were rotating our stations. And we were actually started sharing stations and having 2 shifts because we were outgrowing the space. I was getting more stylists. So that's where I expanded.
Gotcha.
So then I expanded enough for everyone to have their own station. They could start expanding on their hours. And then I went into a commission and booth rental situation for a short time. That became very complicated. So at some point I said, this is what I want. I want I want my salon to be a team. I want my salon to have continuity, and I want there to be camaraderie. So that's when I decided that I was going straight commission. So anybody that wasn't on board, I sat down with everybody, even my stylists that were booth rental, and like I told them, essentially we've always been a team anyway, so it's not going to change that much. We went through the numbers, showing them all the numbers, what they spent on supplies, the fact that they would, all of their taxes, everything would be taken care of now. They would be getting a paycheck. They would have none of that. And I only lost 1 person in the transition. Out of, at that time, I think we were up to about 12 employees. So it was successful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, for you, when it comes to that, let's say that first transition, because I'm assuming that once you made that transition, that just grew
Right.
from a structural standpoint.
Right.
When you went through the booth rent to the commission structure, how was your team put together at that point in time? And by team, I mean the people behind the scenes, the accountants, the financial people, the insurance. How did you go about developing that team that you knew you would need moving forward in a commission structure?
So the nice part about having a salon is you have all of those clients to choose from. So not trying to not mix business with business. You have to be cautious in that sense, because then you know that person sitting in your chair whose hair you're doing also knows everything about the money that you're making behind the scenes or whatever. But I didn't do any bartering. I kept it as business is business. So they came in and paid as a client, and I paid them as a client.
Right.
So we were each other's clients, because I think that's really important. There's a line that gets crossed often in our industry. I think bartering is a very good thing, but you have to be very cautious of that, especially when it comes to actual business, because then there's too many things that can go wrong. You know, if it's housekeeping or babysitting, or there's other things that I did barter with my vet, say, or something like that for grooming, things like that. But I think when it comes to business and business, that you have to keep it business.
Yeah. Usually they need you more than you need them.
Exactly.
You find yourself in a scenario where it's like, well, I'm doing a whole lot of stuff, and you talk about your vet friends. It's like, my dog doesn't get that, stick that off, and I don't need to get a bath every week. And you're in here every 2 weeks looking for services.
Exactly.
I feel like I'm getting taken advantage of.
Yeah. So as I built that team, a lot of the times I also would seek out people that maybe weren't clients, that you could have that business relationship, that were established, that I never even crossed the line of trying to get them in my chair, let's say, and recruit them as a client. We kept it as a business relationship.
Gotcha.
So, and that was good.
Where did you conceptually understand that needed to be a part of the team? Because I run into a lot of, when I'm talking, especially to students and talking to a lot of stylists, they tend to think they can handle all of those things.
Right.
How did you know that you couldn't, and when did you make the separation between you as the stylist and you as the business person?
A lot of times, unfortunately, those kind of lessons are learned because negative things happen. Right. So you go to your accountant one year and they're doing your taxes, and they say to you, you really should be doing this quarterly. Instead of that's when you realize that you might have to put them on the payroll, because knowing the deductions, as my team grew and I ended up with 32 employees, you end up doing all kinds of things. Like, I had a barber, a great barber, but he had child support issues that had to be taken out of his paycheck. Right. So when you start having things like that come up, they're very unique. You need somebody that is a professional to do that in order to keep it happening. The success of my business was a lot of me because of my passion for my business, but I also believe that it was because I knew when to ask the expert to come in and stick to what I was an expert at, and let the other experts, sometimes even managing, you need that person that can step away from the situation. I'm there to stand up for my style if someone's complaining. You know, if they did a horrible job on my hair, whatever, I want to stick up for my team member. And it's hard to sometimes separate yourself because you're like Mama Bear. But you can have that manager in a neutral position that it's just her job to do that, you know. So sometimes it's just recognizing those significance of the different parts that people play that's really going to be key in the success of getting to that point.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Seeing how you started in this business early, when did you start to understand the importance of personal financial planning and savings and those kind of things? Like, you know, a lot of folks run through money really, you know, because of the nature of the business is cash. You kind of just like, okay, I'm going to spend Tuesday because I know Thursday's booked, and I can spend Thursdays because Saturdays looks good. When did you kind of get that understanding age-wise that, okay, I need to start kind of planning some stuff out and putting some stuff together?
You know, I think that you can never be too young or too new to the business to start having that discipline, because you never know when there's going to be an accident and a broken bone. And you can't stand for the long hours that we stand. For us, our job is very physical. So it's not even about having a flu virus or something like that. If you're out with a compound fracture, that could ruin you for years to have to rebuild. And your clients, you know what, we all want to think they're loyal, and we all want to think at the end of the day they can't live without us because that's what they say. The truth of it is, when it comes to their hair and they've got special occasions or whatever coming up, they forget your name real fast because they find somebody. They'll find somebody. And whether you think that a lot of times I think that stylists think that no one can do what they do because they are successful and they are booked and they've got a full schedule, but there are other people out there that do what we do as well as we do it, and the clients can find them if they need to. So I think planning for that. Also, with me being responsible for all of those other people in the salon, I always had to know what if there was a freak accident? What if there was water damage? What if the roof blows off the building? What if this happens or that happens and you don't have a place to work? You still need to be able to supplement those employees and set them up and find a place where they can work and still make money and pay their bills. I had a policy. I was 6 months out for payroll. So I always made sure that my account had covered me for 6 months. And the first time that you have a walkout, where you have stylists walk out of your salon and start their own business behind your back when you don't think they would ever do that, and your top 3 people walk out the door that you've done so much for and you've grown them, and you always think, well, my people will never leave me, they love me and I've done so much for them. Guess what? That happens to the best of us as well, and that you feel that in your payroll real fast. If your top 3 producers walk out, you feel that real fast, because then you've got to scramble. So you've always got to have a plan B for that as well, because you still know you got to keep the lights on for those other people, because once that domino effect starts to happen, it could get ugly real fast. And then before you know it, you've got more people leaving because you're like, we have to cut back because so-and-so left and so-and-so left. You always want to have that plan B. So I always say, make sure you've got that money for a rainy day.
Gotcha.
For sure. So important.
Now, well, you brought up an interesting point. Let's talk about the walkout, or the concept of the walkout, and the concept of, not necessarily the walkout, but the concept of a stylist growing and progressing and wanting to step out on their own. How do you, having gone through that, how did it affect you then? And the person that you are now, knowing that ambition should be a part of this business, how do you feel about it now? Yeah,
I mean, I think like open communication and honesty is key, but that doesn't always happen. And even though you think that you do everything you possibly can for your people and nobody could give them more, there's always going to be that opportunity or that person that thinks they can. I feel like it's a very tough situation, because I've heard both sides of it. I've heard people say, like, I went to the owner and I thanked them for everything that they had done for me and said, but I'm really ready to move on and think I can do this. And instead of them saying, I'm really proud of you, let's make this a seamless transition, whatever, they kick them out the door. And that's happened to me. That happened to me when I decided to open my salon. I decided I want to be open and honest and upfront with them and tell them, look, I need a month to finish up, and they said, pack your stuff. They changed the locks. Actually, I found my stuff packed outside to pick up, so I always said I would never be that salon owner that would do that. But then, people get scared. So they just don't know, So there's never an easy way. So you just have to look out for you and have a plan B if it happens. Because no matter what it is, and you think this could never happen to me as a business owner, because I'm on top of it and I know what's going on, it can happen.
Yeah.
Like natural disasters. Yeah. A fire can start, a roof can come off, a flood can happen. It could be negligence on another tenant's part that's above you, below you, beside you. That's going to affect you. Mm-hmm. If somebody drives their car through the front window of your salon by accident because the brakes go out, you're going to need some time to clean up that damage and get yourself up and running again. You're going to need a few days, which means you're going to have to compensate your employees so that they don't run off somewhere.
Gotcha. So most of your salons have been a combination of salary plus commission?
Well, they started out. It started out with booth rental, moved into commission, and then became a salary plus commission, a salary or commission. So it was kind of this is your salary, or if this exceeds it. Yeah. Or if the commission exceeds it, right, then they start working. I also have always worked on a sliding scale. Mm-hmm. So the more that comes in, the higher the percentage goes to the stylist. Gotcha. So I went all the way up to a 45-55 split. Oh, okay. Usually, would be my highest split. Gotcha. And that would be, at X amount of dollars, you moved up to that. Yes.
Now, is that something you created, or is that something that you just, you became familiar with as a result?
I came up with that based on geographics, because every area is going to be different for how much you can charge. Mm-hmm. There's a price point that's acceptable in LA, and there's a price point that's acceptable in Southeast Georgia, in a town of 32,000 people. So I based it on my average. Mm-hmm. So as we started moving into this sliding scale, again, it was something I was able to present to my team, mm-hmm, and say, okay, this is going to be super exciting, guys, because this is what we're going to do. So for a lot of those people, it meant getting a raise without even necessarily having to raise their prices, by me being able to recognize. Also, when somebody is new and coming in, for them to sit there all day waiting for walk-ins and new clients to come in, depending on how much turnover you have, this gives them incentive to be there and want to promote themselves as well, to stay busy the hours that they're there. So it intended to work, really well for everyone. Understanding the dynamics of your team, is huge. What drives them? Is it gift cards? Is it cash? Is it, what kind of incentives? What really gets them going? Can you offer them a hotel room at the beach for the weekend? This is the trip. Whoever sells the most retail. Maybe it's a Louis Vuitton bag for whatever. It's what drives them. What is the incentive? Do they want cash money? Do they respond to gifts?
Yes, yeah,
What? Yeah. And so I think understanding that also, for me, working the shifts out, trying to have people working 10 and 12-hour days is very unproductive, because we all know that the best work comes from 6 hours. Right. That first 30 minutes, the last 30 minutes, and the lunch break that you take away. Right. So when, people brag about, well, I work 15-hour days, it's like, what quality of work are you doing those 15 hours? So for me, the young people that wanted to be out partying, that didn't want to get up at 9 o'clock, but they were amazing from noon to 7.
Right.
So that would be their shift, or 1 to 9, or whatever the hours might be.
Mm-hmm.
The ladies that had young children in school, they want to drop them off at school, come in, put in their shift, and then they can be off in time to pick them up, or shortly after their children getting out of school, so they don't have daycare issues. So it just keeps everyone productive and happy. Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the students that you see now, what do you feel are the students' strengths? And what do you feel are some of the students' weaknesses for those that are coming out of school now, coming into business?
It's interesting, because as a guest artist for Joico, I do still go into cosmetology schools, often to teach, as well as on stage at big, huge shows with very seasoned, veterans who I still think of students if they're in your hands-on class. They're attending to learn. Exactly. What I'm seeing with the new generation is a lot of confidence. I think that I feel like the students that are turning out now new, regardless of their age. So I don't want to necessarily say it's young people because our industry is so different. When I went to beauty school and graduated from my cosmetology college, I was everybody was close to my age.
Gotcha.
It was very rare for a mature woman, let's say if somebody even over the age of 30, 35, to be there. Now people in their 50s are going to cosmetology school and getting their license and starting a new profession. And so when I say confidence, I think that it comes, it's not about the age, it's about a different culture coming out, whether it's a different quality of education, whether I think that maybe the schools are more in tune to preparing students a little more for the real world. It's not as clinical. Maybe we used to wear uniforms. It wasn't like, oh, just dress in black. We actually had like these nursing uniforms and white nursing shoes we wore. So I mean, it was like, ooh. So I think it was just so much more clinical, and we left school thinking everything was going to be much more regimented and structured. And then you go into this wild and crazy salon environment, and you're just like, wow, this is not what I expected.
Yeah.
Now I think that they're much more in tune to that and what they need to be, and that's where a lot of the confidence is coming from. But that's my biggest thing is definitely confidence and really knowing a little more about the real world than maybe 20, 30 years ago we knew going into the salon.
Yeah, that's the advantage. What about
It's an advantage. The disadvantage is now there is a ton of competition. Our industry is so saturated that they're going to need every ounce of skill, confidence, and whatever else they can pull out of their toolbox to be successful. I think it's harder than ever now because the competition is there. I mean, right here at Salon Republic, we have 70 studios in this one location. So I hear people say it all the time, like, well, the block where my salon is, there's, a salon on every corner, or there's, within a mile radius, there's X amount. I said, well, try being in, 50,000 square feet with 70 other studios that are all in business for themselves competing. So competition is definitely a big thing right now. Yeah.
What's the road you think most new students should take? A lot of them come out and want to jump right into behind the chair, assistant. What's the road you feel best served?
I think that when you come out of cosmetology school, that you should consider yourself to be a student for the rest of your career.
Yeah.
I mean, you're always learning. I just recently took a class, a 5-day course with Sharon Blaine from Australia, and I just took a finishing class with her for avant-garde finishing and photo shoots and things like that. I felt like, okay, this is an arena that I can grow in, so let's just check it out. And I learned so much. It was a very expensive course, but you have to pay for that when you reach a certain level of education. But I would say take every class that you can. I know a lot of the distributors, the Cosmoprof distributors and different distributors, they're always offering these in-store free classes. You can never hear too much about all the manufacturers. I mean, I still, as a color competency trainer for Joico, have to be fluent in all color lines because part of my job is to be able to go in and do conversions. A salon changes their mind. We don't want that color anymore. We want this color, your color. Then I have to go in and help them transition. And so I need to know those things. So to me, it's not even knowing everything about a particular brand. I think it's knowing everything about a lot of things and then choosing the brand that suits you, because there's a lot of amazing professional brands out there, and it's just finding that one that you understand its behavior and make it work for you. So yeah.
Hollywood. I know when I talked to Anthony and he had referred me to you, he talked about some